Buying the property in 1995, starting to plant berries in 1996 and 97, and building this place up over time to what it is today. But all of this was a worn out cornfield and just open land, and I can't even remember what it looked like. It was so long ago and so different looking. I thought what we might do while we're waiting for a few more people gather is I've just got a few things up here as far as structural components basically of this netting system, as well as hand sanitizer for anyone to use because of COVID. So we need to be conscious of trying to make sure that everyone is staying safe when we're handling things. Just the very basics. This is actually the yarn, what Tek-Knit calls the yarn that all this netting is made out of. We have the 80-gram netting is what we have used for 6 years. The first 6 years of this project of netting, I had the 80-gram netting. And then over time, I started to think about ways to talk to Tek-Knit about making it better. And I gave them a few improvement ideas for the 80-gram. And then I said, you know, what's really needed is something that if we start to get a tear in the netting, it cannot go the length of the netting because we get 40-mile-an-hour winds through here. You get one tear and you have the potential for a piece to get ripped almost the entire length of the planting. So we came up with what we call 85-gram netting. And that is what is on the planting this year. But I wanted to have this so they could get a close-up of it. And it's the 80-gram netting, but with additional threads crossways through it. So it kind of acts more like ripstop fabric. And it's heavier weight, it's more durable. You can see here where I poked a hole in it and it hasn't really gone very far. We've got a few areas with rodent holes. Yep. Got a few areas where we had some voles chew their way through the netting, and we were just looking this afternoon, and it seems like it stretched a little bit, but then stopped where some of the cross threads are. So I think it's really, really valuable improvement in the netting. The 80-gram still works fine. I used the same exact pieces of netting for 6 years and would have used them for year 7 this year had we not come up with the 85-gram netting instead. So that's also good durable netting. I'm just always trying to think of ways to make it better for growers.
Can I ask a question regarding
sure.
that? Is the 80-gram as stretchy as the 80?
Is the 85?
Yeah, is the 85? Because the 80 has quite a bit of give to it when you install it.
Yeah, I mean the 85.
And this looks like you don't have as much give to it.
Well, it does still stretch because last week we had a hailstorm here that we had accumulating hail, and that netting stretched enough that where the hail accumulated, it accumulated about this deep. The netting's still intact, as you can see, but it stretched and was actually down on top of that bush there. It has since rebounded some.
Okay, good.
But it also stretched because we did not have it attached to the top the way we should have. So it is still stretchy. Whether or not it's as stretchy as the 80-gram, I
sometimes the 80-gram felt stretchier than I needed it to be.
Okay.
So that was, and it looked to me like maybe it was a little more firm and didn't lose its shape quite as quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
But you do want some stretch, like what we saw with the hail last week. But we had hail accumulation on the ground. We had hail accumulation on the netting. And 20 hours after the hailstorm, we still had some hail sitting on the netting in some of these spots. And the netting is still in good shape. So to me, that was very, very satisfying to see that it made it through a hailstorm of that degree. Then the other thing that I wanted to show you, because it'll be a little bit harder to see, the other innovation this year in this system is this whole idea of panels zipping together. In the past, I had used wire lock channel and wiggle wire like what's used in a greenhouse to connect my pieces together, and said, can we try zippers? So this is a zippered system. Good heavy duty zipper right here. Oh, guess I didn't know my own strength with taking off that zipper pull. And part of the system relies on this pocket here, so that this area here with the grommets in it is actually what's attached to the cable in the planting. And then this is up above it, so that there's never any direct tension on the zipper itself. So the folks at GinTec, the manufacturers of the structure itself, are the ones that came up with this idea. And we've had 2 cases this year where we had over 40-mile-an-hour winds, the hurricane and then the hailstorm last week. And this has come through 40, 42-mile-an-hour winds without any issues.
What do you call the black stuff? What's the name of it?
I actually don't know what the black part is called, but it's got these grommets in it.
Comes with the grommets.
Yes, yeah, they manufacture it with the grommets.
And that was GinTec and Tek-Knit?
Yes, so the structure itself is made by GinTec Shade Solutions in Ontario, Canada. So it's gin as in G-I-N as in ginseng, because they make a lot of shade structures for ginseng. So it's GINTEC Shade Solutions. And then the netting itself is made by Tek-Knit Industries in Montreal, Quebec.
And how do you spell that?
T-E-K-K-N-I-T. So it's a knitted fabric. And the fabric itself is called Exclude netting for exclusion. Okay.
I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late. Why the 85 versus the 80 was the improvement?
So the 85 gram has these additional cross threads. So it's more like a ripstop fabric, so that if you get a tear in it, it tends to stop, versus the 80 gram. We had 45-mile-an-hour winds here last October. We had a few areas of abrasion. It picked it up and ripped it for quite a long length. This is designed to not do that, but that would stop within a couple feet.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So we also have here a bunch of the different components of the structure. Shall we go into that now, Chris?
Sure.
Okay. So, Chris, why don't you do more of the explaining of the components?
Okay. So I'm Chris Callahan with UVM Extension. I'm an agricultural engineer and have worked, supported protected culture, high tunnels, greenhouses, tunnels of all types for the past 10 years. And Dale Isla reached out maybe 3 years ago after having done a couple years, I think, of hoops and netting, and asked if there was, a way to maybe do a different structure, and something that would use posts and wire was what we kind of came up with. Last year we did that using PVC posts and some nylon cable, I think.
Yeah,
high tensile nylon.
2 years ago.
Was it 2? Okay. And it worked pretty well. Dale Isla could talk more about that and the generations of the systems you've used. But what we really want to focus on today is the current demonstration, which was done under a Northeast NESARE farmer grant that Dale Isla submitted and was awarded, to demonstrate a wood post, steel combination wood post and steel post and wire system. And the idea was to get familiar with both a wooden post system and a steel post system in one installation with some grant funding. So the idea would not be to do both ever again, but rather see how each works and understand the costs and the nuance of installing them. And so the basic approach is it's fairly straightforward. You have posts that you want to keep plumb, straight up and down. And there's a grid of wires that you sort of quilt over your planting. And they either go through the wood posts or across the steel post. We'll take a look at the details later. But the posts support the wire grid, and that wire grid supports the netting. And that's the basic idea. And I'll let Delilah speak to how this feels and works compared to other approaches, but this was the project. The wood posts, which we'll take a look at when we get inside the structure, are buried in the ground. So you auger out a hole, the posts go in the ground about 2 feet down, you fill that back in, make sure it's plumb, and then you send wires through them, through the top and over the top. The steel posts go on top of an earth anchor. So these are helical anchors. They're a steel rod about 1 inch diameter. And at the bottom, it has a sweep. That's a helix. That basically a screw that screws into the ground. And the steel posts sit right on top of that. We don't have any extra. So we'll show some inside if we can. And then all around the perimeter, you can see, well, hopefully the folks online can see as well, that the netting comes down at an angle. And one of the reasons it comes down at an angle is the cables have to come down at an angle. Those cables need to be tensioned in order to support the netting and to hold the structure up. And to do that, if you came straight down, it'd take a lot more to get that horizontal stretch, horizontal tension. So coming down at an angle lets you do that. It also means you need to drive anchors in all the way around the perimeter to attach that cable to make that tension.
And those anchors
are like the other ones, except longer. So the inside anchors are 3 feet long, 3 feet in the ground, and the outside anchors are 4 feet. So that was one of the big lessons learned, was how to get those in the ground with rocks in the soil, and also just different ways of doing augering for posts. And so we started out with an earth auger. So the 1-person earth auger that has a gas engine on it and a big auger like for ice fishing. And that was really more of a wrestling match than an earth auger. We had a 2-person earth auger, so same sort of thing, bigger engine and 2 sets of handles. So two people stand facing each other and run it. And that felt like it was going to be a trip to the ER for broken ribs. And then and part of why we tried those was we have an existing planting. So to get a tractor in there with a PTO auger or a Bobcat with an auger was going to be really tricky. There's a middle ground on this, and it's called the groundhog. And that is something everybody should write down. Because the groundhog is the piece of equipment for an existing planting to do anything related to setting posts or anchors.
What if you have a small tractor that has a post hole digger?
If you can, so the question was, what if you have a small tractor with a post hole digger? If you can get it in between rows and get it backed in to where you need to do it, go for it. Our challenge was getting something in there. These are pretty mature, large blueberry bushes. So, and we can talk about post placement in the rows as well, which is kind of an important thing. So the groundhog has 2 wheels, and it's a trailer hitch. You put it on a trailer hitch to get it to the site, and then it's moved around by hand on 2 wheels, kind of like a heavy wheelbarrow. It has an engine, and it drives hydraulics, and hydraulics drive the auger out on an arm. So it's a lot more stable than trying to use an earth auger, and it's more portable than a tractor or a Bobcat. So it really worked out well for us for driving for augering holes, but also for driving anchors. And any of these earth augers have a hexagonal shaft. I believe it's 1 3/8. And we made up a prototype adapter that would go over that shaft. So take the auger off and put this on, and then the anchor head goes right in here. The anchor head looks a little bit like a loop of steel. So the shaft of the anchor comes up and it's looped around, so it kind of fits right over. So we made a prototype that we broke 3 or 4 times, and then we went to a welding shop and had them make a real one. And I'll put the plans for this online. It's pretty straightforward. It's just, this side is just enough to fit over the earth anchor head. This side is sized to go over the shaft of whatever you're using to drive the anchors.
Is that stainless steel? Or?
This is just carbon steel. Yeah.
Chris, just a question. I know you took a lot of video. I don't know if it's available publicly, but that is the plan, to get
Yes.
a lot of this available so you can actually see these different successful and not so successful approaches to various parts of this construction.
Yeah. So there were 2 questions. I'll just repeat. One was, what's the material? It's just carbon steel, so nothing fancy here. Could be painted to make it last longer. And then Greg was pointing out, as part of this project, we will have videos. We took a lot of video and photographs as we were doing this, showing each step and how things are used. Some of it is pretty nuanced, and we spend a lot of time learning, and we don't want you to have to do the same thing.
Can I ask about the wood posts? Is there a particular type of wood?
I can't remember what question is about the wood posts. Do you remember what type these are?
I believe it's ponderosa pine.
Okay, that sounds right. Ponderosa
Not
pine.
treated in any way, no pressure.
They're not treated. No.
How long have they been in the ground so far?
This
May.
just got erected in June.
And how tall are they?
They are 10 feet above the ground.
So they're 12 foot.
12 foot.
Okay.
Question was type of wood, which was ponderosa pine. They're 12 feet long, buried 2 feet, and this has just been in since June. Okay, we talked about the wire, and so the wire is 1/4 inch stranded wire. It's 7 strands. It's pretty heavy duty. You know,
I think it's called aircraft cable.
Aircraft cables. Yep, sometimes it's referred to as aircraft cable. So this comes on a big roll, and you unroll it to length. In our case, we were doing a little over 80 feet in one direction and a little over 40 feet in the other.
240.
Sorry,
250.
80 this way, 240. Yes, thank you, Dale. Yeah. So it's, anyway, long lengths of heavy wire. So that's one thing to be prepared for. It cuts with bolt cutters. And the key is how to stretch this, or how to get it tensed and taut, so that your structure's ready. And that gets us into some of the other equipment that we used. These being a really critical one. This is a cable winch. The orange thing is a cable winch. You may be familiar with these. Some people call these come-alongs. Come along? Come along? Just come along for a walk. I like these a lot. I found them to be a lot safer, a lot more dependable. I knew what would happen when I did something with this. This, at times, we found the lock would either not lock or lock when you didn't want it to, and so you were spending a lot more time wrestling with the tool than using it. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. I would never use a come along again.
Yeah. And then the other really important part is what's called a cable grip. And it does just what its name implies. It grips the cables. So this has a little clamp here that when you pull on it, grabs the cable. And that's important because a lot of what we're doing is pulling cables. And so all you have to do is get this close to the cable, and you start putting some tension on it, and it will pull that. Right? So you use this to pull the cable through the post and get it to tension.
And are there brands, or does Husqvarna make one, and Black & Decker makes one? Or?
These are almost all made by a company called Klein. Yep, K-L-E-I-N. These we got right from GinTec, by the way. So, and actually they sent the orange cable winch as well. And I don't know the brand of this. I'm not sure the brand of this. Oh, Columbus McKinnon makes the orange one. What else is important, Dale?
The bolts for
Yep.
connecting the cable or for holding it once we've got it tensioned.
Yep. So the basic approach is getting two posts, the two end posts to be plumb, and have the cable taut. And to do that, you need 3 cable winches. So there's an anchor on either side of those 2 posts. The cable winch attaches to the top of the post down to the anchor and pulls the post plumb. You do that on both ends. And then another cable winch, you lock in one end of the cable just by looping it around an anchor. And then the other end is loose. And you attach the cable winch to the other end and start pulling on it through the anchor. And the guidance is tighten it until you start to see the anchors move. Okay?
Which was terrifying, I just want to say. Sorry, I couldn't help but say that.
Yep.
I was like,
So it's tough. We would love to have a measurement, right? Like when is it tight enough? And the guidance is when you start to see the anchor just start to move, stop.
Move up.
Move up, right? So right, the anchors, if they're angled like this, will start to move in with the tension. But Dale is right. What we want to do is look for it to start to move up out of the ground. And once you have it that tight, you have 2 ends of cable, right? You have the one that has come through from the other side, and then you have the loose end. And you put a 2-bolt clamp over those. In this clamp, there's channels for 2 cables. You can pass that around. And so that's how we made this loop. Right? So this is what it looks like once it's tight. This is going down to an anchor. This is going up and over, and this is the loose end you just tightened. So one of the things that we sort of stumbled on was when putting these in, remember, keep the sharp end facing down, away from where your netting will be. And that's kind of an important rule all around. You want to prevent any sharp ends from facing the netting. So there are other pieces that attach to the top of the post that we have to be careful of. And we actually went around and duct taped a lot of things just to be on the safe side. So you'll see as we walk around inside, these, for example, you won't see these because they're all under duct tape. Thank you. So we talked about the cable, the wires going through or alongside the posts. And what we do is get the cables, perimeter cables, all tight, and then put a bunch of cable clamps. So you've probably seen these before. Just a U-bolt with a yoke on the other side and 2 bolts that tighten it down. And what those are for, we put on the perimeter, we put 2 of those on either side of the post, on the wire on either side of the post. And so all that's doing is keeping the post fixed relative to the cable. So the post and cable can't slide relative to each other. We do that all around the perimeter, and then as we're setting the inside post, the interior post, we do the same thing. You know, 2 of those, or 1 of those on either side on the interior.
And you leave those on.
And those stay on. And again, face the sharp edges down when you do that, right? So.
and those bolts with the cables going through, is that a manufactured product?
Yeah, it's actually just called a 2-bolt clamp. So the question was, is this a manufactured product? These are. You'll see these actually, if you walk along the road, that these are used to anchor telephone poles and things like that to the ground. So 2-bolt clamp, 1-bolt clamp. Yeah. We'll go on another field tour. What else? Hog rings. So Dale Isla mentioned that this current netting system has a zipper between panels and grommets. And the grommets are used to attach the ends of each panel to the wire. And the way we do that is with something called a hog ring. It's just a piece of maybe 1/4 inch galvanized steel that goes through the grommet, and you use a special pair of pliers, hog ring pliers. And you imagine this is up there, and you catch the cable, and you just cinch it down, and it stays. And then
But I want to mention that Chris makes that look very easy doing it with his one big strong hand. And for those of us that don't have big strong hands, it's an entirely different scenario. And we've actually talked with GinTec and Tek-Knit about that. And for part of the attachments in the future, when they're doing quotes, they're actually using snap clips or carabiners rather than hog rings for all of it, because
Well, the bolt cut, you have to need bolt cutters to take it apart.
if you ever want to take it apart, it's bolt cutters, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and there are differences. I mean, the sections where you plan to unzip every year and fold to the side, use the carabiners, and maybe the sections that are more permanent, hog ring, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Greg, anything to add from installation?
No, I just say I think I still have blister marks from using this thing.
The hog ring pliers are one thing I do like about these. These are brilliant. Is that you have the bag? They are made to be a one-hand thing. They have a spring that holds that, which is kind of clever, you know. And so you can have one hand getting everything together, hold it together, and go. Or get it close and then two hands. What else?
I think that's it for, wire lock channel and wiggle wire.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things I've learned, I should back up a little bit and mention that, this year is year 7 of us using netting on the planting. And over those 7 years, it's less than 1% infestation of spotted wing across 7 years. But one of the things that I learned is that it's really important to make sure that we have it well anchored at the bottom around the entire planting. And this year we used wooden baseboard along the east end and the west end. And then we used metal pipe and sand along the north side and the south side. But where it's attached to the wire baseboard, we use this wiggle wire lock channel and wiggle wire, which is what's used to hold greenhouse plastic on greenhouses. And so we've just adapted this to use with the netting. One of the things that I've learned over time is that, this has a lot of tension and can damage the netting inside. So now we actually put 2 pieces of used greenhouse plastic in between the netting and the wiggle wire itself. So that protects the netting from being damaged by the wiggle wire. And it also, when we're taking it down, makes the wiggle wire come out really easily. You just pull it out on one corner with pliers, and then the whole thing just kind of zips out because of the plastic in there.
Could you just go, so you put the netting in the channel and then drive the wiggle wire in it? Or?
Yep, exactly.
You can actually see it right on the vesicle.
Yeah. So right here, you can see, so there's the channel, and then there's the netting, and then there's the pieces of heavy duty plastic, and then there's the wiggle wire. Okay. All right. I probably should have mentioned earlier that both netting projects were funded by Northeast SARE as farmer grant projects. And so the first project that I had, which some of you have seen, I actually used cannibalized high tunnel hoops. And that worked great for me for 6 years. But with the labor situation being the way it is, I've known for a while that we would need to start moving to more pick your own than we had in the past. And I worried about these hoops coming down and people walking into them when they were walking through the planting, because we didn't have, with the hoops in there, you know, the netting kind of went up and down and up and down. And I was always worried about somebody walking right into one of those hoops and a lawsuit starting because of it. So as Chris mentioned, 2 years ago, I just experimented with some PVC posts on these first 2 rows actually, with the post and wire to see if we can get the whole structure up in height. And I really liked the atmosphere with the higher structure, felt far less claustrophobic. But we had some issues with the netting coming down at a 90-degree angle over the posts, and the PVC posts weren't strong enough. So that's what led us to this, let's try a wood post. Actually, we were going to do a wood post system, post and wire. And talking with GinTec, they were like, well, we have this metal post option. So we said, well, let's compare the two. So the first SARE Farmer grant showed that the netting works and works really well, less than 1% infestation over 7 years. This SARE Farmer grant is specifically to teach, to both get feedback as far as how the system works, but also we will be doing a series of YouTube videos to teach all of you and any other grower that's interested how to do this. So if the thing about tensioning the cable seems a little intimidating, we're gonna have a video that shows us tensioning the cable. And so we took video for every single construction step there is that we will be working on this winter, so that if you don't want to hire somebody to do this, you can do it. And I'm not a big construction person. It's not part of my background. But if I can do it, you can all do it. So these YouTube videos, I think it's the coolest part of the project that we're really, really excited about. We also got money from state ag and markets through some federal specialty crops funding to look at it from some more of the science-based issues and doing demonstrations so growers can see what this system looks like. I know one of the questions that has come up is, how does the system work for pick your own? Because people have been very leery about the pick your own. And we expanded our pick your own a lot this year. We had hundreds of people come through here, and every single party that came through here thought this was the coolest thing that they had ever experienced in their life. There's some other peoples in New England that have put up similar structures made out of different materials for a support structure, but again, tall, airy, nice and bright and light. And they've had people say, wow, you know, you could hold weddings in here. It's just this really fantastic environment that people just love. And so this whole thing about, oh, people won't accept it for pick your own, at least the customers at the Berry Patch have blown that out of the water, because I had so many comments this year of, I've picked a lot of blueberries in my life and I've never picked blueberries like this, and I've never had such a great atmosphere to pick blueberries in. And this is the best managed blueberry planting I have ever been in my life. So, you know, and I got that from people a lot. So the customer acceptance of this, consumer acceptance of this is pretty darn high. So I just want to make sure that was one of the questions I knew would come in.
So how do you get the netting? So you got the armature up, and then I always sort of envision 2 people walking down with curtain rods, you know, and just walking it. Like, how do you actually get the netting on it, on the armature?
Okay, that's a great question. The question was, how did you actually get the netting up and down the length of the planting? And that was trial and error as well. But what we wound up with was we had the roll of netting suspended here on a metal rod so it would roll freely. We had one person basically feeding it off the roll, and then we had a rope tied to the end of it, and I was Yeah, so that was on the cart. And then Elizabeth would just kind of like, and then we would feed it up and over. We had a rope tied on the end of that, about 100 feet long. I was on the end of the rope pulling, and we would get it up over each wire and just pull it down the length that way.
And so we bundled one end of it and tied a rope. So that, right?
Yep.
So that you could throw the rope over the cables going across, and then pull the rope.
Right.
To bring the netting over.
Yep.
And we had a T.
Yeah. So the first piece went up that way one evening, and I said, we need some assistance with this. So then I made 2 PVC T's. Just took plain old PVC pipe, made a T, and then we had a person. So you've got somebody feeding the netting here. You've got a person between the pieces of wire with this PVC T holding the netting up. And then you've got me on the end pulling the rope with the netting. And so then you're just moving from section to section with the PVC T. And the PVC T was a really valuable tool that, you know, we just duct taped it together. I had a T fitting, and we always have PVC hanging around, but it was like 1.5 inch, 2 inch PVC pipe that we made that way. And I put it together in like 5 minutes, type of thing.
How did this hold up with the wind?
So we had it go through the hurricane this summer with 40-mile-an-hour winds. And we had an accumulating hailstorm last week with 40-mile-an-hour winds. And it looks the same now as when we put it up. We found with the hurricane, we had one set of baseboards slide up where it's attached to the anchor. I'll show you inside. So we had that corner right there raised up about 2 inches above the ground, but it was the baseboard that raised. It wasn't the anchor. So then we just added a little more sand in that area to cover up. We had 1 to 2 inches of daylight where the baseboard had raised, but nothing else raised up.
And how wide are the sections as you drape them over? Do you drape them over in sections and then zip them together?
So it's one long piece.
Yeah.
So it's 250 feet long. And in that 250 feet, there's 3 sections of zippers that overlap. Okay, so we zipper up 85 feet length with one zipper, and then those zippers overlap. We'll show you inside where they overlap. You start the second zipper, continue zipping it, and then you get to the third zipper, and that's what comes down to the end on this end.
So do you put like 2 26-foot panels up and then these 2 26-foot panels and then zipper them together? Or do you like fold them, or are they all already joined before you put them up?
Yeah, why don't you talk about that?
The question is, how did we approach putting the panels up? Right. Like zip them all together on the ground, then put them up. We went panel by panel. And one of the reasons is we wanted to learn about hog rings and the zippers on one easily accessible panel, ideally from the ground. So we did the far panel that goes down to the ground first. And so each panel went up, was hog ringed, zippered, and then the next one. So we did it panel by panel going in this direction. Was that the question?
Basically.
But isn't that a zipper seam there?
Yep.
Because what you sounded like you were saying was the zippers went that way.
No, the panels, we added the panels going this way, zipping this way.
So all on the ground?
No.
No, just the first one we were able to.
You gotta zip them up when they're up in the air, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And they don't rip through, you have them the poles up and the netting over the pole, and that doesn't rip, or do we have something on there to keep that from ripping?
So what it is it's attached to the cable through these grommets right here. So this floats above the top of the posts.
Was your question?
Yeah,
whether
no,
there's
so you're right here,
protection on
I'm
the
looking
top
at
of
the
the
end post
post.
where it comes over the top.
Right.
Now that doesn't wear a hole
That
into there?
has not worn because in the wind, that floats up.
And typically, and the question is there any issues with wearing the netting because of where the posts contact it? And where you're pointing at, the two black strips should come together at the cable. They haven't been connected there.
Right.
So they should come together at the cable, and that makes that pocket more of a balloon.
Is there a cap over the post?
There's a cap over each post as well, so that provides some protection. But ideally, we're looking to avoid any rubbing of the netting against anything. That's been a problem in the past.
And how many years you get out of netting, or don't we know that yet?
Okay, so in my old system, I used the same netting for 6 years. And I would have used it year 7 if we had not switched to a different type of netting that is redesigned this year. The warranty is for 5 years against UV degradation and weathering. So, a lot of it also depends how people treat it.
And there's a question on Zoom about if you do have any concerns about pick your own customers damaging the netting or any other ways that the netting might be damaged.
I had no issues with pick your own folks damaging the netting. We emphasized that we were doing this so that we did not have to spray our blueberries, and people just seemed to be so overjoyed about that they just thought this was really great and were very cooperative. I would say we only had 2 or 3 people all year that were not cooperative about COVID precautions. So I think people were very respectful and just glad to be able to get out and pick fresh local fruit. So, we don't have people running along the sides. I mean, our plants are right, they're far enough away from the edges. We had some kids that like to pick grasshoppers off the sides of the netting because they didn't like picking berries. But we had no issues with people, being close to the netting or trying to damage it or anything like that. My one concern on our north side is that the row is very close to the edge. So we actually did not have the public go on the north side of that row. And it wasn't because of the netting, it was because I was worried they would hit the cable when they were walking between the post and the cable. So we picked that north side. So we just kept the public away from any spot that we thought could be an issue for them walking into something that they shouldn't walk into.
Now, did you see any labor difference between the metal post system and the wood post system in man hours?
Yes, and that was one of the things I wanted to highlight in my notes. Oh, the question was, were there any differences labor-wise between the wood posts and the metal posts? And if I were doing this again, I would just go with metal posts for a couple different reasons. The metal posts are designed so that if there's an issue with failure, if the structure comes down, you replace one metal post very easily. And actually the outside ones are designed to kind of snap. So the top is separate from the bottom. But installation wise, to get all those holes augered out and set the wooden posts and make sure they're level and plumb and straight was a whole lot harder to do with wood than the metal posts, which you're just driving 1 anchor in that's got a steel plate, you're setting the post on top, and then the only time you have to worry about it being plumb is when you're actually tensioning that cable and you make sure it's plumb then. So I felt like the steel structure went in a whole lot faster than if we had done this with just wood.
And how about material costs for the same square footage comparing steel versus wood?
The steel's about 2 to 3 times more expensive. The question was square footage cost, wood versus steel. The steel's about 2 to 3 times more expensive than the wood. I agree with Delilah. There's significant labor efficiency with the steel, and not just about setting the post and the ground level stuff, but all the ladder stuff is a lot easier too. getting the cables connected to the posts, it's a much easier connection than the wood post. So I think, and when you look at the costs per square foot in general, the bulk of it is the netting. And, you know, so labor I think was like 12 cents per square foot. The netting, so the netting was 32 cents per square foot for this project. The steel posts steel post structure was 20 cents. Wood post structure was 7 cents per square foot, and labor was 12 cents. So when you roll that up, the range is about 51 cents to 64 cents per square foot. And I could say that other people doing netting structures lots of different ways, it's right about that low end of this as well, 50 cents, high 40s to low 50s. Does that ring true for you, Dale?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've seen different types of structures go in. Those numbers do seem to be pretty similar. Certainly, the larger the structure that goes up, that cost per square foot comes down. I know there was a quote made on like a 7-acre installation, and that wound up being, and it was all metal posts, and that wound up being 38 cents a square foot for the structure and the netting. So, talking about per square foot figures, I did some calculations because people are always worrying about, you know, what's the payback cost, and that's certainly dependent on what type of yields you're getting. But I actually have my data from 2014 through this last year when I did this trial, and so I have the yields in pounds per acre. So I varied between basically 7,000 and 13,300 pounds per acre, varies off this. And then I figured that out as far as my gross income per square foot based on a half acre. So my worst year was I had a 95-cent per square foot gross income in my lowest yielding year. And my best year was $1.74 per square foot in gross income. Bearing in mind that 2019 and 2020, because of labor shortages, we had a significant amount of crop that fell on the ground and therefore did not get harvested and are not included in these numbers. Either yield per acre numbers or gross income per square foot numbers. So this is just based on berries that I actually sold.
You know how many fell on the ground? Did you figure that out?
I figured this year I lost between $15,000 and $20,000 of blueberries on the ground.
So this is killing two birds with one stone, the spotted wing and the birds.
It's killing 5 birds with one stone. It's keeping out birds. It's keeping out spotted wing drosophila. It's keeping out hail, which this year hail was at the end of the season, but other years hail has been during my season. It's keeping out heavy rain, which knocks off very ripe berries. And it's keeping out heavy wind, which knocks off very, very ripe berries. So, you know, people are like, if you look at average blueberry yields across the country, Oregon has the highest average yields, and they're at about 9,600 pounds per acre. So we exceed the yields that they're getting in Oregon. Our marketed yields are exceeding what the average yields in the highest yielding state in the country are. And I think a lot of it is because of those other things. You know, I don't lose anything to weather, no matter what type of weather it is. So, you know, I look at this and it's like, okay, 50, say it was even 55 cents a square foot investment. I'm recouping that in 1 year. And that's just 1 year. And this planting, you know, will go another 20 years. I mean, I've been harvesting off it for almost 20 years now already. So when you're talking a long-term planting, and keeping out all these weather effects. It's just like every other aspect of protected culture. I mean, the more you can control and keep weather out of it, the better off you're going to be.
How many varieties do you have?
So the question is, how many varieties do I have? And I have 16 different varieties. Early season to late season. Every year we pretty much start harvesting between July 5th and 7th. This year we stopped September 3rd. There's been some years I've gone as late as September 15th. There's been other years where we finished up as early as August 20th. Yeah, this was a really hot year, so we were picking on all 16 varieties at the same time, which was, yeah. But, you know, people are putting in high tunnels all over the place because everyone sees what the yield advantages are and the advantages of being able to control things. The blueberries are similar. And I know, you know, we're getting really high yields. There's a grower in Quebec that agrees that he feels excuse me, he feels he's getting 30% higher yields. We don't know if that's physiologically because of the plant or if it's the weather, the weather impact.
I mean, just netting for birds, you should be able to get 30% more.
Yeah.
So if you haven't netted for birds yet, this is the thing to think about.
Yeah. Laura or Greg, you want to talk about spotted wing at all? While I get my voice back.
Yeah. Yep. All right, Laura, I don't know if you want to chime in here, but
Sure.
as I think everybody would recognize, a motivator for getting up the netting, even though Dale Island mentioned a number of advantages of it, this particular netting with a small mesh size was motivation to keep spotted wing drosophila out as much as possible. And we've been helping Dale Island monitor the infestations over the different, you know, structure systems. And overall, the big take-home message is virtually no infestations until very late in the season when you're pretty much done picking. And at that point, it's pretty low. So there's been no need to actually spray. One thing that does happen, it's hard to stop, is occasionally something gets in there and gets going. We usually don't see it till later. And one of the things we're still working on research-wise is there anything we can do to kind of capture those invaders before they really get going? And like last year, this year, Dale Island put out extra traps to try to collect them. We're working on other ways of attract and kill that might work better under these netted situations, just to get the few ones that get in there somehow. And you know, how they do that, we don't understand, but it happens. It's really hard to keep them out 100%. But even with that, really, there's been no need to spray. So overall, very, very effective on that regard. With a little bit more work. I don't know if there's any questions on the spotted wing aspect.
No, I want to just say something. I've done hoops for the last 4 years. I'm in Northeast Ohio, and Ohio State's been monitoring my lab results. And I have almost an identical, I have very, very little problem at all. And I've been monitoring, my traps have been one inside and one outside so I can see what the pressure is outside. And very clearly there's a pressure outside because when you have no pressure inside, you get to thinking, well, gee, is this an easy year?
But you have gotten some inside. Have you seen any infestation or virtually none? Or
I would say virtually none. I'm thinking of, now my season's a little shorter. I start the end of June and end about the middle of August because I don't have I don't have the really late varieties. And I've never had any problem with any of my berries. My traps over the first 3 years were like practically zero. Maybe one or two would show up
occasionally,
you know, and we were at that point counting males and females, but it was negligible actually.
So that's good to hear. So there's replication
so
of that.
The hoop system, which is not nearly as high tech as this is beautiful.
But you use the same netting, the 80-gram netting?
I use the 80-gram.
Yeah.
Yes, Delilah actually provided me with that. My hoops, the first 4 years were just about 5 feet tall. So my pickers really kind of objected to that a little bit.
Yeah.
This year I put posts in, line posts, 3-foot line posts, and I've gained another 2 feet, and so I've got 7 feet. I just did that last week, and I think I'm not gonna quite. I don't have your 10 feet. I love your 10 feet. But my bushes are not that tall, and I've just been pruning them down to about 5 feet. So I'm anticipating keeping them at 5 feet and trying to leave that 2 feet above. See how that works.
And the other thing I would mention is the entryway, this double zippered or sort of the go in, zip it down. That just is to kind of keep flies from moving in with you or your workers or whatever. And I think that's been a nice addition. We have never tested what would happen. Well, we have. We've ran experiments where we've lifted up the sides to get in and pull them back down. And by the end of the season, we have lots of flies in there. They're tiny, you don't see them, but they get in. So you have to take those kind of precautions. Laura, do you have any additions?
Well, I just wanted to, so your message about the pressure outside versus inside. So this year we started getting SWD and traps outside at around June 9th, but it wasn't till July 20th that we saw just a few. And then there wasn't really any infestation because we collected data for quite a long time at berries that went to Greg's lab. And it wasn't till the very beginning of September that there was any noticeable infestation with larvae. So what they were fairly aggressively picking, trying very hard to keep up with all of the ripening fruit, and they were able to stay ahead of what might have been an infestation, but really it never came to that. And we've been doing this for 6, 7 years,
This is year 7 now.
Year 7, and honestly, it's been like this or much better. Truthfully, this was a challenging year because we started much earlier.
In terms of flies.
Yeah.
How do you dispose of your spoiled berries that you actually don't want to be attracting? In other words, they're for whatever reasons you don't want to market them. And I've been putting them in plastic bags and hoping that they die off. But what are you doing in order to be sure that whatever is around the outside of the net doesn't keep multiplying even more?
That's a good question. So I've never done it on a commercial scale, so it's not fair. We would put them in bags as well and put them in a freezer or lay them out in the sun and just bake the heck out of them.
I've been doing, just putting them out in the sun,
Other people have tried burying them, but you got to bury them pretty deep. So I think.
Well, the raccoons dig them up.
Yeah, that's even
so
another
that's right,
example.
yeah.
So
Digging them they
I don't
dig
know,
them out.
did
Just
you
as quick
try
as I
anything,
buried them.
Delilah, also?
So what we did, Lois, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had an infestation early because the netting went up too late. And then again this year, when I first started to hear that there were flies in the traps, we went on this sanitation blitz with sweeping up any dropped berries that were on the ground. And since I put down weed mat this year, that was really easy to do. We put them in 5-gallon buckets. I live about a mile from here. We take them to our house, and then I fill up the buckets with water all the way and put like a piece of plywood on top, and they drown.
Great. Okay. I need bigger buckets because I filled the buckets up too full. And
Okay.
okay.
The thing that was interesting this year, though, was we did that sanitation blitz. We took them home, and my husband doesn't always like having it filled up with water, so he actually poured them on the driveway so that we would run over them. But one of the buckets stayed in our barn for a while, and it was really interesting because even 10 days after that bucket was in our barn, not one single insect was around that bucket of swept up drops. And I don't know if it's the black weed mat, if it's the drought, if it was the dry weather, plus the weed mat. But something dried out those berries enough that nothing went after them. And when I saw the bucket in the barn, you know, it was like, it had been in there about 3 days or so when I saw it there. And it's like, I'm just gonna leave it there and see what happens. And I never saw an insect come out of that. And, you know, it was a 5-gallon bucket full of drops. So I meant to tell you about that this summer and
I'm now
forgot.
contemplating why that would be.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have any issues with Japanese beetles?
We have not had any. Nope. The question was any issues with Japanese beetles, and we've not had any issues with Japanese beetles. We had some skeletonizers in there this spring or summer, I should say, that I believe we got a second generation because I had some in there like in late September. And frankly, I was just too exhausted at that point to deal with them. So I'll have to keep an eye on it next year and get on it. You know, it was very spotty. It was like 1 or 2 spots on a couple plants. But I'm going to have to get on that next year and make sure it doesn't spread to multiple plants. I don't know what it was. These guys don't know what it was. It was something that mainly skeletonized the leaves. The second brood seemed to do some more direct leaf eating as well. But again, you know, we're talking maybe 6-8 plants in the fall.
So with the Japanese beetle, oh, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Leslie.
Well, no, I was going to do a Japanese beetle. I have a problem with Japanese beetles.
So I was gonna.
And they deposit, they go into the soil,
Right.
and so they stay in the net. You can't get out of you.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with them just as quickly as you can.
That's what I was thinking. I don't know if you've ever had a problem with it,
No,
but if you
okay,
have
once they're in,
nice grass in there, they're going to lay eggs in
that's,
there.
That's exactly right.
And then if they are in the soil, how do you get it?
Well, so I've been putting milky spore down for the last 4 years. And it takes a couple years for those to work. This year was my best year. I lose. That needs to be your next experiment. I lose. My berry loss comes out of the Japanese
Yeah,
beetle.
yeah. So that's a good point. And the milky spore can be effective. It's expensive. So
It's expensive,
you put a lot of
and
money into it. But
I can't tell whether I was skeptical the first 2 years whether it was effective or not. But the last 2 years, I have fewer. So I don't know if it's. I don't actually know whether it's the variation in the beetle cycle or whether I actually it's starting to be effective.
and there's some other organic stuff that's possible to use against the grubs. And then there's, of course, conventional insecticides if you're
Yes,
not
right,
organic.
yeah.
But once you get rid of them, maybe you're okay. I mean, if you can get rid of them, then your netting goes up, and about the time before really they come in, and it'll keep them out. So I could see it over a couple of years you could get it under control. But yeah, they must go crazy underneath the netting.
And I tried to put the Japanese beetle traps inside once.
Yeah,
Because Japanese beetles attract.
they love it.
everything.
Yeah.
But I tried to put them, at one of the spots, and quite honestly, the Japanese beetles thought that the berries were much more tasty than the fair room that they were smelling from whatever the commercial thing is that you're using with beetles.
Okay.
So, I mean, that odor just draws, and at my place, that the odor of those berries ripening just draws anything that's possibly like blueberries.
What you said organic things that you could do with Japanese beetle. Do you have a name of
Well,
something?
the milky spores of bacteria. What was that fungus? I don't have the name. There's a fungus that can. It's a different one, I think. And then there's nematodes. There's some nematodes that are effective against the grubs that you might be able to utilize. I'd have to look up what the other non-milky spore alternative was, but we were looking at using it in vineyards actually because of similar issue, except it's foliar feeding, not fruit feeding. But I'd have to kind of post that somewhere. I can find out for you though.
Okay, that'd be great.
Not related, but did you do any special prep for the weed mat?
None. No special prep for weed mat. We tried to get it down fairly early. So we put it down and yeah, we just got it up as close to the blueberry crown as possible. Some of it goes into the middle because it's 5 feet wide. Other is 4 feet wide. It's all weed mat that I already had. It's not like I bought it new or anything. And we just use staples and then some rock bags to hold it down. And we'll be picking it up after. We're going to sweep it all up to get rid of any inoculum from drop berries, mummyberry, anthracnose, etc. It'll allow us to remove all that debris from the planting. And then we'll be rolling it up because I do worry about voles under it for the winter. So we're not planning to leave it down for the winter. But we have a fair amount of bindweed in there, and it really helped reduce the amount of bindweed. I mean, there's still some sections with some bindweed in there, but my feeling is if I can use that weed mat for 2 or 3 years in a row and really knock back the vigor of the weeds that we were getting in there, we should be in fairly good shape. We use a lot of mulch anyways. We mulch it with fresh wood chips every year. So we've always had a good thick layer of wood chips. And I think, from our yields, I don't think you'd really know that there's a weed issue in there. I always hated how it looked by the end of the season.
How did you keep the berries, the new shoots come up when you put the weed mat? How did you keep the shoots? How did they come up through? They don't grow through the weed mat.
Well, our weed mat just goes up, we've got a strip probably about 1 foot wide right at the crown of the plants where there's no weed mat.
Okay.
So our shoots are coming up right at the crown and there's no weed mat right at the crown. So
How do you lay down your mulch?
by hand. Yeah, with a wheelbarrow, we dump it, then we rake it. Yeah. So just a couple more points I want to make, and then we're going to move inside. I neglected to mention that before we started using netting, I lost 40% of my blueberry crop to spotted wing drosophila in 2012. So, it was pretty easy to justify an expense like netting when you're losing 40% of your crop. The second year before I had netting, I sprayed for spotted wing drosophila, and because of days to harvest restrictions and the fact that we harvest every day and that I only have a backpack sprayer, I was spraying 6 nights a week and said, I'm not living this way. And that's what got me into the netting. And there was one other point that I wanted to make that has flown right through my head. So hopefully I'll think of that again later. It wasn't, but thank you. So people asked about repairs, and we're actually going to do a trial this winter with looking at different options for repairs. But right now, what I have found works best is Gorilla Tape, especially the waterproof Gorilla Tape, and you put it on both sides of the netting. So where we get like vole holes that we've got a few of, one of us will be on the outside, cut a piece of waterproof Gorilla Tape. And while one of us is on the inside with a piece of wood, the other one attaches the tape on the outside, and then the person inside puts a piece on so that the tape is sticking to itself as well as the netting. And that has worked out quite well for us. If it's just a little bit, you can just easily sew it with needle and thread. I also just recently inherited an old sewing machine, so maybe I can actually do that for some pieces if I need to, run an extension cord out here. There's also these hand sewing, like bag sewers that you can probably use. But it's something that I keep bringing up with the manufacturer that we need to come up with something that works as a repair kit that will be fast and easy for folks. So that's one of the things that we're going to look at with some of the funding that is available through these 2 grants as well. So,
what will you do in the winter?
So winter storage, about 4 years ago, we started storing it in the field. In our old system, we would undo every other wiggle wire purlin. We would wrap 52 feet of netting together around one purlin and then wrap it up with UV resistant black pallet wrap. This year we will, we call this the side panel, panel 1. This is panel 2, panel 3, 4, etc. So panel panels 1 and 2 will come together at the common cable. We'll wrap it up with UV resistant black pallet wrap. We'll be unzipping it between panels 2 and 3. Panels 3 and 4 will come together over the middle cable, wrapped up with black pallet wrap. We'll unzip between 4 and 5. And then panels 5 and 6 will come together on the far end. On the top cable, wrap it up with UV resistant pallet wrap. We got it to the point in our old system with hoops and using the wiggle wire that we could put this up each spring, doing all the wiggle wiring and everything around the entire perimeter and down each purlin. We could get it up in 12 hours and we could get it down in 6 hours and wrapped up for the winter. That remains to be seen. The 6 that's person hours. So my husband would wrap it up in the fall, 6 hours. And when we would put it up in the spring, we would have one helper and they would basically do 1 purlin a day with the wiggle wire and a little bit around the perimeter. And 2 of them 6 hours a time over a few days so that you're not out there like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 4 hours straight. But that's person hours, 12 person hours to put it up and 6 person hours to take it down.
And what was it, the UV, I missed the, you wrap it around the cable with UV something or other?
So we wrap up all the netting together, get it in as tight a bundle as we can. And then we use UV resistant pallet wrap. So UV resistant plastic that we wrap around it, black UV resistant pallet wrap. And yeah, it comes on rolls, so it's really easy to just go down and wrap it around.
And are you using ladders?
So in the past, our purlins, we would actually lower so we could do it from ground level. So this year we'll have to use ladders. Yeah, so it may take a little longer. Okay, so we would like to have everyone go inside so you can see the components better. And maybe we'll just kind of take a tour up and down a couple of the different rows so you can see the wood posts versus the metal posts. Chris can talk a little bit more about how we joined everything together inside. Okay. Oh, the other thing was the vestibule. That was the other thing I was going to mention. So our plan is to make a bigger vestibule. We wanted to this year, but this got put up just in the nick of time as it was, so we reverted to our old vestibule. But next year it will be wider and it'll be deeper so that we can get lawnmowers through it and larger groups of people. This year with COVID, with the pick your own, you know, I took people in and assigned them to different locations. So we would have a party. I would unzip the first door. They would go in, I'd zip it up. They would unzip the second door, go in, zip it up. I would come in separately for social distancing. That worked fine. Nobody had a problem with that. But a bigger vestibule will be good for multiple reasons. And so that's one of the things that we will be different next year.
Did you accumulate any heat inside?
So our temperature, the question is, do we accumulate heat inside? We didn't put out temperature sensors this year, but in the past we've had temperature sensors. And on average, it would be about 2 degrees warmer during the day and ambient temperature at night. So not a whole lot different. And what a lot of people noticed this year, a lot of customers noticed, was that because it's got an 11% shade factor, they actually felt more comfortable under there, unless it was like if there was a breeze outside and a hot, humid day, it felt pretty close inside there. But if it wasn't a hot, humid day, they thought it was more comfortable inside than outside.
And what do you do about voles? I haven't faced that yet.
But voles, knock on wood, to date, have not been a huge problem for us in the blueberries. I mean, we did have some chew through there. Voles in our high tunnels, we put out snap traps. And we actually found a great trap yesterday. We had a table collapse, and it's one of those plastic black greenhouse benches with the hollow legs. and a couple of the legs were laying on the ground. Well, the voles really like hiding out in those, so they're kind of a trap. So 2 days ago, my husband was lifting up the leg, and as they would crawl out, he would stomp. He got 5 in like 5 minutes, and it's a whole lot faster than snap trap. 5 snap traps.
Those hollow tubes though are really good for bait. You can put bait in there because they do love the hollow tubes. So if you don't want to step on them and you want to kill voles,
we have a pair of herons that's been hanging around here all year long. So when we take this netting off, I suspect we'll be seeing the herons in here. They've been spending a lot more time in our fields than they have the pond, around our pond. So we're really reluctant to use bait because of that. So we're hoping between the bald eagles that are flying over here on a pretty regular basis and the hawks and the herons, that once we move this weed mat back, that we can get a lot of raptors in here taking care of some of them. Yep. 2 emitters per plant. The rain does come through, but it diffuses it. So when the hurricane came through, we didn't get this torrential downpour. It got through here, but it wasn't a hard rain. So that's where I say it protects the berries from hard rain, because we used to, a thunderstorm would come through and those driving raindrops would just knock all sorts of ripe berries off. And now it just gradually drips through, or kind of misty coming through. So last week when we had the hailstorm here, we actually, this netting right here, we had hail accumulation, and it was down to about here, wishing down the top of the bush. You can see it's bounced back, but we had a lot of hail. And if it had been during the growing season, that hail would have knocked off just about everything. But nobody would know this week that we had a hailstorm, and we had hail sitting in the netting 20 hours after the hailstorm was over. So it worked out quite well. So you can see with the wooden posts here, we've got the plastic top on top. Wire cable goes through it. Wire cable comes down to, these are the ground anchors right here with the top. Chris was showing that that adapter that we used. Esther, can you go down and grab that adapter, please? And then as part of the system, GinTec supplied all the components. So there's these, what would you call them, Chris? Sleeves?
Those are called dead men.
Dead men. So the cable comes around here, and then you just use these dead men that wrap around it, holds it in place. We duct taped it so there's no sharp areas from where we cut the cable. This adapter for driving in the cables goes right over this metal, the top of the metal anchor right here. And then we have this cable on the bottom here running around the perimeter as well, which over on the side there will show you how we've got it attached to that part of the cable also. It stops here so that we could put our vestibule in. And anyone that's going to do UPIC, you're going to want to have one section where people can walk through without worrying about tripping. But I think having this bottom cable, we had not had that in the past, and I think that does also help keep everything more rigid and helps whenever we get the wind coming through. You don't want your netting to get picked up and blown all over the place. These are our baseboards that we just had rough sawn lumber that I got at a local sawmill a few years ago. It's purely to hold the wiggle wire and wire lock channel on the outside. So that's the east end. And then Chris, you want to talk about the top? Sure. Post it all?
on the wood post, there's actually a hole drilled through the post, about, I think it was 6 inches down from the top. And the cable goes right through that. And then there's another hole drilled perpendicular to that. And it's important to note that the way you do the posts around the perimeter is different than the interior post. So the perimeter gets a little bit more, has a little bit more work involved. So you have a hole where the cable goes through this way. This cable goes through the post and down, and then the other one comes down and through the other hole. And you can see we talked before about duct tape, the ever important duct tape. And underneath the duct tape, you can see some of those bolt points being used to keep the post fixed relative to the cable. And then at the very top is a plastic cap that goes over the post, just to sort of soften what would be maybe a sharp edge of wood or splintery end of wood. So the plastic cap, just to make to try to reduce the rubbing of the net against the post. Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Maybe just show the hog rings there and how we didn't get everything hog ringed at the end here, but
yep. So these are, you can see how the grommeted net attaches to the cable using the hog rings here. Ideally, every one of these would be attached. And we do have a section where we've done that. We kind of ran out of time before getting it all done. But again, as Dale, what's that?
Just pull those two black pieces to that wire.
Yep, the hog ring is just this little steel piece here, and what it does is it's just a way of attaching the grommet to the cable. And so, as Dale Isla mentioned, there's we're looking at using carabiners or other snap clips to do that in a more an easier way.
But the more you can have the netting attached on a regular basis, the less it's going to billow up, the less likely you are to get damage to the netting from a strong windstorm or something like that. So that's where ideally we would have had this connected all the way, but we got this up 6 days before we started picking.
And I think the third zipper down, we actually have almost all of it.
Yeah.
Attached.
So, how did you decide when to put the netting up?
Well, ideally, I would have put the netting up the middle of June, but we did not get the netting until June 20th. So one key for this is if you want to do this, get everything ordered like in December and January so that you're not putting this up when there's leaves and flowers and fruit on the plants. And that's my biggest piece of advice is put the structure up when there's sometime between October and March, get your structure up. And then in the future, now that we have the netting, I plan to put the netting up about June 15th. If spotted wings start showing up the 1st of May, I might change that. But when you have green berries, they aren't really very susceptible, if at all susceptible. Maybe Greg. Yeah, so spotted wing will not go after green berries. Lois didn't mention, but she always gets hers up the middle of June, which is about 2 weeks before she harvests. And I am much more comfortable when I get this up well in advance of harvest.
Can you put it up too soon?
You don't want to put it up while pollination is still occurring. You would want to wait until the end of blossom, until all the blossoms have dropped. Which for us this year, we still had blossoms out here June 10th, which is extraordinarily late for us. But June 15th would have been about perfect.
Well, my early ones are all done, and the late ones haven't even started to bloom.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's no need to get it up until berries are starting to turn. Okay. But if spotted wing is showing up a long time before then, I just think it's wise to get it up before then. And I know one year, Greg, you guys found a lot of, was it cherry fruit worm that was in here? In just like the first 2 harvests, I think. So my thought is if I get it up June 15th, maybe I can miss a few of those other incidental pests that may or may not be issues for us.
I was
But-
just gonna say, I mean, even though they're not attracted to, there's no ripe fruit, and they wouldn't really be attracted, they're still kind of just floating around, and you could possibly catch one in here or two. So getting it up when you can after bloom makes sense to me. Just to prevent that little low level of infestation or colonization, really.
What I can tell you is the 2 years that we got this up well in advance were the 2 years that we had 0% infestation over 10 weeks. You know, other years were 0.2%, 0.4%, 0.6%. Our highest year ever was 1.2%, and that was when we actually enclosed an infestation in here. But again, as Greg mentioned, we didn't have a problem until August 28th. We had 88% of our crop off before we had any berries that we had to worry about with infestation. But just, you know, I really love being able to say there was 0% infestation. And that's what happened when I got it up well in advance of the berries turning blue. Sorry?
The metal pole?
Yeah, so let's go over to where the metal poles are. Okay, so these metal posts, you know, Chris and I both talked about them going on an earth anchor. So this is the top of the anchor that has this steel plate on it. And the top of the anchor has one of these loops, just like this. So we just used the same adapter to drive these posts down in. And once they're in, then it's just a matter of you're putting this post on top. It fits through, the bolt fits through the loop on the top. And then you don't have to worry about this really being made straight and plumb until you're dealing with tensioning the wire.
And the eye loop of the anchor is actually going diagonally. It doesn't fit in this way, it fits in across the diagonal. And Dale alluded to this before, but these are actually designed to fail as a hinge. So instead of taking everything down, if there's too much load on this lateral load, it'll actually fold down.
It'll break the more.
It'll break. It'll fold at this hinge.
Oh, down here.
Yeah. And it'll fail down there, but then you're just replacing one, you know, instead of having to replace everything. So they're meant to do that.
Is this galvanized?
Yeah.
You want to mention the separate piece at the top, Chris?
And so on the for the perimeter steel posts, there are what are called post tops. And so instead of drilling holes through the posts, these post tops have the holes already drilled in them. And what it does is it lets you lay that out on the ground and get those all on the cable. And then as you're putting the cable up, it's just slipping that post top on the top of the post and attaching it. And that's just on the perimeter posts. We'll look at some interior posts in a minute. For the steel posts on the interior, they don't go through the posts at all. The cable doesn't go through the posts at all. It goes alongside and then is attached with a J-bolt. There's a bolt that grabs onto the cable that goes through the post and fixes it in place, just sort of clamping it in place. And that is one reason why getting the cables attached up on a ladder to a steel post is a snap compared to what has to happen on the wood posts, at least in my opinion. You have a impact driver ready to go, you get the cable roughly in place, you have a magnetic level on the post, you get it plumb in two directions, and you let it rip.
Let's also walk down this row here. We do have a couple posts here that because of rocks, we couldn't get the anchor all the way down. So I'll show you, you'll be able to get a better picture of what the anchor looks like. And as you can see, it didn't affect the performance of the structure at all.
I like that weed mat.
Yeah.
That's what mine are gonna look like there in a few
And
years.
that was very clear.
Yeah.
It was much easier too. The result.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done it yet, but we will be. Wait for a few more people to. Yeah. Okay, so this is not ideal. We would like this anchor plate all the way down on the ground, but when there's an immovable rock 2.5 feet down, we talked to GinTec and they said just leave it the way it is because everything's going to float on top anyways. But you can see this metal plate that this is the shaft of the anchor right here. And my thought was, well, gee, we should cut the post shorter. And they said, nope, just everything's going to float on top, so don't worry about it. This next year, we'll probably get we'll get a 2-foot anchor from GinTec to replace this one. But if you do wind up with issues like this with the steel post, it doesn't tend to affect it. I know with wood posts, people are always like, oh, everything's got to be nice and level. And it was driving me nuts. It was like, this post is 3 inches too high and this post is 2 inches too low. And you can drive yourself nuts with the wooden post trying to get everything level that way. Probably doesn't matter with those either, but we've got proof of the pudding here. We've actually got 2 posts in a row that we couldn't get, 2 anchors in a row that we couldn't get down all the way. And the structure still has worked fine. The cable floated, the netting floated, and it hasn't been an issue.
Are they just screw-in anchors?
There's a flange on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Now, GinTec does have a different type of anchor, they said, that if you've got really rocky ground, I guess it's like a V on the bottom of the anchor. And so you drive it straight down, and then at the end, you twist it 90 degrees, and that's what holds it in place. And if they had known that we had as many rocks in our soil as we did, they would have sent those instead. But they're used to, to dealing with structures going in on nice silt loam, sandy loam soil. So, and I said, oh, well, we have some rocks, but we've put up 4 greenhouses and only ever had to move 1 post because of that. So they sent the type with the flange, but they do have other options as well for depending on the type of ground that you have. Chris, you want to show the J-bolt?
Yeah, if you look at the very top of that
Here.
post, you can see where the cables cross it. And it's going to be easier to see, I think, from that side.
Yep.
There's a what's called a J-bolt, and it's just a bolt, and the top, instead of being a hex head, wraps around in the form of a J. And so that grabs onto the cable, and the bolt comes through the post, and the bottom of the J just holds the cable against the post, and that's how that post gets fixed relative to the cable.
You can see it on that one, Chris.
Oh, cool.
You're always saying that it's easier, and it's because of that J-bolt hookup.
Yeah,
you
the
don't have to run the wire through the pole.
Right. So yeah, just to repeat, the metal post we found to be a lot easier to install and to connect with the cables. The installation's a matter of slipping it over the top of the anchor. So once you have the anchor in, the hard part's done with the steel post. You slip it over the top of the anchor, you get it plumb in one direction, you drive that, you tighten that J-bolt to fix that direction, and then you get it plumb in the other direction and drive that J-bolt. Done.
How'd you drive these anchors into the ground?
These anchors we drove with that adapter that Delila's holding. That goes on the end of an earth auger. And the earth auger that we really liked for this job is called a groundhog. So it's a toe behind earth auger that you move into place by hand. It has an engine and a hydraulic pump that drives a hydraulic motor. And the hydraulic motor drives that into the ground using that adapter. And it's basically two people. I think you could do it with one person if you're ambitious. And you move it from place to place and drive the anchors.
I'm just picturing you guys going like this, like with an ice
Yep, I did one of those by hand, and that, yeah, just to see what it was like.
What is the post spacing?
These are 15
foot
in this
outside.
direction, 20 in this direction, right?
How much did the whole thing cost you when you were all said and done?
Chris has those numbers.
It's about $11,000 total in materials.
To do a half an acre.
Yes.
That 50 cents a square foot is,
11.
but
Yeah,
that,
11
well, 50 cents a square foot, right? Yeah. So 51 cents a square foot. Larger acreages are more cost efficient on a per square foot basis. I'm not sure that it's really going to be a whole lot different for a third of an acre. You know, it'll probably still be around that 50 cents per square foot type of thing. You know, a lot of it is, and the reason we're doing these videos is it's all about finding the right tools and right equipment, because once we got the groundhog to drive the anchors, you know, we did all of these steel posts in one afternoon, the anchors for the steel posts in one afternoon. And
the steel posts themselves, again, in an afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, once the anchors were in, putting these steel posts up and attaching the cables was really easy.
Yep. And then the tensioning of all the wires, half a day, 3/4 of a day.
I mean, probably 2 days.
Okay.
I would say 2 full days for all the cables.
Yeah.
It's
And
a
the
bit
long
tricky.
cables are a lot more difficult to took a lot more to tension than the cross cables, obviously. 240 feet versus 80 feet.
How come you didn't put the uprights in the row?
Okay, good question. Why didn't we put the uprights in the row? Because these are 25-year-old bushes, and I did not want to disturb those root systems. And so I put it right along the edge of the mulch. That way it was easy to access. I wasn't damaging the plants. I wasn't damaging the root systems. And they're still in a place where people can easily walk by them. You know, they're not right in the middle of the aisle, so we don't have to worry about anyone bumping into them. They're clearly visible, but I did not want to be disturbing root systems of such healthy plants.
So somebody else was asking that question before we all got down here. And I think it could be a difference if you have an existing planting versus if you're planning for a planting and planning for netting as part of that. You could certainly plan around post locations in a new planting. But for an existing planting, I think, you know, Dale Isla's concern is really a really good one.
Are you planning to take this whole structure down over the winter?
Oh no, structure stays up forever. Yeah, it's the netting will get moved for winter storage, and everything else, you know, we've got a couple posts that we need to wooden posts that we need to re-straighten. I haven't noticed any issues with the steel posts.
So if you look down the line here up at the top of the post, you can see how that section that we're just getting to is all nicely connected. All the black margins on the netting and all the grommets have been connected to the wire. And so this line will stay connected permanently. Right. And the other ones, the other zippered sections will be unzipped and folded to this cable, sort of like a curtain, right? And left up over the winter and wrapped in the UV.
How come you can't take the netting and squeeze it together and then wrap it up and then you're done for the winter?
That's what we're doing.
That's the plan.
Oh, okay. I was just under the assumption you're going to take it all down, pile it in a pile somewhere.
No, that's why I'm saying sections 1 and 2 come together on one cable and get wrapped up. Sections 3 and 4 come together on this one.
I thought you were going to do like a bale of hay. That kind
No, it will be stored on these cables during the winter.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you know if the fabric can be, you can order it sort of custom widths, or does it just come standard?
So it's manufactured in 6.5 foot and 13-foot widths. You can also buy it. You can also get it in 19.5 foot widths, and sewn is 26-foot widths. You can order custom lengths. It's made, standard roll is 100 meters per roll. If you want longer than that, you can order longer than that. But because of their manufacturing, efficiency wise, it needs to be 100-meter roll. Occasionally there's remnant rolls, but the width of the machines, it's 6.5 foot or 13 foot. And then if you want it sewn, it's 19.5 foot or 26 foot.
And are you the distributor for this stuff?
In the eastern US, I am distributing Exclusion. Yep.
So we would order for you.
Yep.
Can we see a section where it was sewed on the long? Is that coming up pretty quick? The long pieces sewn together?
So this next aisle over, that's the seam right there.
But no, to do the full length. Because you said that it needed, isn't this the long way? Isn't there a seam somewhere across here?
No, it's only the length where it's sewn.
But I thought you said that there were multiple zippers.
Oh, the zippers, yeah.
It's gonna have to be a row over.
No, there's a zipper here. So it may be easier to see on the next one over.
Oh.
The way it's not attached. There's one over here.
Oh, so hanging down there? Okay. Sorry, Laura. On the outside. Yeah.
Okay, so right here is an example of where the zippers join each other basically. So we started zipping from the west end, and we had zipper number 1 that came a third of the way down. Then zipper number 2 ends here. This is zipper number 3 that goes there. So zipper number 2 comes along and goes, they overlap each other by about 6 inches. Again, we don't want to have entryways for spotted wing. So this is zipper number 2, goes over the top about 6 inches where you can't see it. Zipper number 3 is what's hanging down. And then that just goes the rest of the length of the planting. Yeah, there's that whole issue of, do you do 1 zipper? Do you do 3 zippers? Do you do 5 zippers? What happens if one of the zippers won't zip? But they felt that by having 3 in here, if one of them goes south, basically, you still can have most of it be zipped, and to repair or replace 1 zipper or a section of 1 zipper in 1 segment is going to be a lot easier than having 1 entire length that needs to be worked on. And in most places, the zippers, moved really easily. We had a couple places where it was a little harder to move, and that seemed to be more an issue where the netting might have a little more tension where it was sewn there. But we were able to get all the zippers zipped the entire length. Steve or Chris or Greg, do you have any other comments? Or Laura, do you have any other comments about the zippering?
Not about the
I thought it was black.
other than as you get closer to the end, you can imagine as starting at one end, you have a lot of flexibility. And as you get closer to the end of a run, everything starts to get tighter and tighter. And so it does become a little bit harder for one thing to hog ring, to get these edges that come together. And the same is true for the zippering, from what we found as you get further along.
Now, is that a zipper on that side between these two sections?
Yes.
Right there, that's a zipper?
That right here is a sewn seam.
Yeah.
And then on the far side, right at the corner, where
Right
it
at
goes
the
from
post.
horizontal to angled, is zippered.
Is zipper. Every zipper you have, you got one of these black, the two
Right.
black
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's, what, isn't this, well, I'm confused again. Isn't that section 1, that's section 2, or is that whole thing section 1 and that's section
No, section 1 is the side piece.
2? I see.
And it's zippered to section 2 at the top of those posts.
I see. So you're taking this zipper out and going from here to over there and tying them up on that.
Right. So that side piece will come up to the top of the post, and this piece will get
To the top
pushed
of the
to
post.
the top of the post and all
Okay.
wrapped together.
And then this one will go over to
To the
the
middle.
middle, and then the next two will come back.
No, the next one will come back so that there's 2 in the middle. And then the far one goes to the north side at the top of the post, and the side piece comes up
So we
to
only have 3 spots where they're,
correct.
okay. I'm confused because I'm thinking this is a section. But it's
Yeah, no, this
two,
is
2 of these pieces is a section.
yeah. So this shows, the 13-foot wide pieces are sewn together.
Yep.
You can see that they're triple stitched where they're sewn together. The old pieces were a different sewing manufacturer, so it was just a single seam, whereas this is triple stitched. So it should be a good long-lasting seam.
So what are these? 13 or 26 feet altogether? All the way over
So these are actually 20 feet.
20 feet?
Yeah. Because we did 20-foot pole spacing.
Yeah.
But in our old system, they were 26 foot. They were 13-foot pieces sewn together because I didn't have the zippers. So we just attached them wherever they came together.
And the 20-foot spacing is because you have 10-foot rows.
Right. Right.
How
So-
far apart on the post setting? Better question for GinTec. I think 20 was the limit that I remember in terms of post spacing that they were comfortable with. No.
I think they go at least 24 at times.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anyone that is going to think about doing something like this, information that you would need to provide to GinTec is, I've had people say, "Oh, well, give me a quote on 4 acres," and it's like, well, what's your row length? What's your planting width? What's your row spacing? What's your in-plant spacing? Are all your rows even? Are some at 10 feet or some at 12 feet? You need to have all those dimensions ready to go because they really, every system is custom designed, and so they're going to need to know the exact dimensions. How much space do you have on the side of the plants? How much area do you want left for workers to go between plants and poles? How much space do you have for cables to come down on the side? We had some restraints or some constraints because of an asparagus planting there and our raspberry tunnel there. But I keep getting people saying, "Oh, so what would 2 acres cost?" And it's like, it depends on your situation and what your dimensions are.
So I did want to quickly point out, because we're right by a wood post, the differences in how the cable connection goes. And this is a good example of how it doesn't go.
Right.
But it does let you see a 1-bolt clamp that holds the cables fixed relative to each other, right? So where the cables cross, you put a 1-bolt clamp and that holds those cables together. they actually don't get really well attached to the post. They're meant to drape over the top, and that tension in the cable is meant to hold it in place. You can see that doesn't always happen, right? That cap should be up and over the post, and the cable should be up and over the post. So the way I'm not a huge fan of that attachment, and it's another reason why I really like the way the steel system works for attaching cables. We talked about putting staples through the cap and all sorts of other attachment ideas here. When you're up there trying to do it, a lot becomes infeasible. You know, up on a ladder and trying to keep it plumb, and again, so just having a good, simple system for doing that attachment really went a long way with the steel. You can see how a wooden post normally would be right behind Delilah.
Okay. There's a question here that may have been here, I apologize, about how many hours of install for anchors and posts and wires.
Okay, so install, once we got the equipment figured out and figured out that the groundhog was the best equipment to use with this adapter, we got all the metal posts put in one afternoon. So figure planting this size, if we had known what we were doing from the start, we could have gotten all the anchors set in 1 day or less. And then, what did we say, Chris?
I have it here.
Okay.
So the layout, so it was Delilah, Don and I doing layout, that was 6 hours. So that's just making sure you know where the perimeter is and setting flags for what would be a true square or rectangular layout. So you don't have a parallelogram, because if you have a parallelogram or a trapezoid, this isn't going to be fun, right? So 6 hours layout. Augering for the wood posts was 3 hours. 3 people, 3 hours. Driving the anchors was 2 people, 6 hours. Perimeter cables, so the 4 main perimeter cables that draw the rectangle, was 4 people, 4 hours. Interior cables, 3 people, about 10 hours. Steel post cable attachment was 2 people, 1 hour, I think. And the wood post was 2 people, 3 hours. Trimming, wrapping, another 2 people, 2 hours. So duct tape and whatnot. Wood post caps, 2 people, 2 hours. The netting, installing the netting, was 2 people, 6.5 hours total, over several days. A lot of this was over several days. That was the other thing, is doing this in the middle of growing season and field season and research season for us. It was always, you know, finding 2 days in a row to do the job and then coming back to it a week later. Hog rings, what we did took 3 people, 2 hours. And the vestibule, I had 2 people, 8 hours to build a vestibule from scratch and get it fit up, maybe less.
Yeah, that sounds high.
Okay. So all told, people hours, I have about 130 person hours.
And that's us doing a lot of learning on the go.
For sure.
So, you know, learning from our mistakes,
yep.
It would be a whole lot less than that. I kind of think you could have a whole system up in a week.
Yeah, and actually our total hours.
Half an acre.
Yes.
Yeah. And our total hours were 50.
Okay.
So the person hours was higher, but the actual calendar time, sure.
Right. Yeah. So a week or less. Yeah, because there's that steep learning curve, and us doing it the first time, you know, learning the right equipment to use was a big part of it. And hopefully people watching this and watching the videos this winter will be able to have you skip a whole lot of that for what we learned here.
Great.
Any other questions or anything else anyone wants to see in particular?
I would just like to see it done on our post.
Well, you know, there are installation teams that will build this for you. I mean, that is something to consider.
If they can get
The thought
across
that
the
went to
border.
my mind, is there one person that could be hired to guide a crew?
I mean, one of the things
rather
that
than the whole-
one of the things I've been doing is reaching out to some of the high tunnel builders, and because it's translatable, right? I mean, and so there are folks who go around building high tunnels, and I think this could be another opportunity for people to do that. And I think it certainly is a great option for some growers, right? To be able to just have that come in and be done.
Yeah.
So that is part of our outreach for this project, is connecting with some of those folks.
And potentially talking to apple growers who are used to doing trellis and posts and lines. You know, they may have some perspectives and
Yep.
experience that would be valuable.
That's a great point.
Yeah, or a crew that's looking for something to do in January and February.
It all makes sense.
Chris, did you want to talk about this?
Oh yeah, thanks. So this is another tool. Like, I must not have mentioned it outside. This came from GinTec, and it's it's made to fit into the top of the steel posts. So part of the installation for the perimeter posts is, and in particular when you're setting those, when you're tensioning those cables, is keeping those posts plumb while you tighten the cable. Because if you imagine a cable running over the top of my fingertips, the minute we start to tighten that, it's going to want to draw things in. And so we anchor the posts. We use the come-alongs to anchor the post to an anchor on both sides, and then tighten that cable. And for the steel post, this makes it really nice, because you can slip this in the top. You hook your cable winch up to this on this end, and that gives you something to actually hold the post plumb there. So another super nice tool. This came from GinTec, so we didn't make this one. And for the wood posts, you might remember the double loop of cable that we have out there. We use that. We put one loop over the top of the wood post, the other loop we attached our cable winch up to, and that's what we used.
With the wood posts, my concern would be how quickly they would rot out. And to go to that much work just to have it rot out would be a drag.
Yeah, and I don't have a sense for lifespan from.
I don't either. Although, Greg, you said you've got wood posts in some of the plantings at Geneva, right?
Yeah, we've taken them out, but yeah, for the raspberry netting, you mean?
Or just like some of the trellises.
Yeah,
and
for the
such.
vineyard posts and stuff like that. I don't know if those are, I think those are treated, and they'll last quite a long time, but, and you said these weren't treated?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. So I think that might be an issue.
But for organic, they can't be treated.
No, that's a good point too. Yeah.
Sounds like metal to me.
I mean, originally, when this went up, I just thought, oh, wood's gonna just be nicer. But I quickly, before we were done, I had said, metal is the way I would go in the future.
Didn't we think it would be cheaper? I mean, that was one of the factors, was just trying to keep the expenses down. And on a per piece basis, it was cheaper. But when you add all the labor and everything else, all of a sudden it's not such a big difference. Right. And then if you add in how long it lives,
Yeah, I mean, the metal, you put it up and it's going to be there as long as the planting is, or longer. But, I go back to the value of a planting and how long that planting can be in the ground. And I mean, apple growers are investing, I don't know how much a trellis system in apples cost per acre, and then they might pull that planting out. Where's Elizabeth? How long is an apple planting staying in the ground?
Tree fruit person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
well,
Laura.
vineyards will go 25 to 50 years as a minimum.
Okay.
Vineyard, I don't know how long the trellising lasts. I think a long time.
But I mean, it seems like apple growers, anyways, are changing varieties fast enough that 15 years, and people may pull out a whole planting and
More likely to graft over
Yeah,
than to
okay.
remove
I hope
them.
they don't have to pull them out at 15 years. 'Cause
What is their establishment cost? It's tens of
Huge.
thousands.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, the point is, you know, this blueberry planting is 23 part of it's 23 years old. It's got at least another 20 years to go. So you're talking about a planting that can be around for 20 to 50 years and investing 50 cents a square foot for protecting it from 5 different threats with a long-term payback. You know, it's pretty simple math for me. And I'm one that I like to, if I make a capital investment, I want to have it paid off within a payback of no more than 3 years. And when I'm losing 40% of my crop, spotted wing, and I'm getting the yields that I'm getting, the payback's 1 year for a permanent structure like this, I think that's a pretty good deal. Any other questions?
Thank you. That was spectacular.
Great.
Thanks for taking us on, Dale.
I do want to mention that this has been a great team effort from the very start. We couldn't have done it without Chris and Greg and Laura and Natasha, Laura's technician, and my husband, and one person that helps us out on occasion. So it's been a very rewarding project for us as well. And I am just so psyched to work with Andy and get these YouTube videos put together because I think they're going to be totally awesome. So,
anything online? Any questions you see there?
No, that was the last one.
All right.
Stay with us.
Yeah.
Stay
All right.
with us.
Thanks, everybody.
yeah.
Right, thanks. Here, Chris, I'm gonna give this to you.
Lawnmower and weed whacker.
No, I was just
Taylor
going to
rent-
say, how much would you rent it?
We rented the groundhog from Home
Yeah,
Depot
but
in
we put down mulch
Every
every single
Nassau?
year.
Put down 5
I'm
inches.
sorry, Nassau was where we got the.
Groundhog?
I mean, we have
groundhog.
some
earth
binding,
auger.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah, I
Home
think so.
Depot rents them. Taylor Rental didn't have one in Great Barrington, but we rented other things. They're available.
Some of the bindweed starts to get weakened. That, you know, where it starts
It's a
to
great
come
machine.
up and
Now,
weak.
if you were going to
So we basically do
undertake
an
this
ocean
from
meeting
scratch,
and then a fall meeting.
a team of how many people would you want to have there?
Yeah, it depends on the phase but I would say at least 2 to 3 people on a pretty regular basis. For doing the cables, you have 3 cable winches going at any one time, and you got somebody down there and somebody there. On the long runs, we use walkie-talkies because it's got to be coordinated. If I'm tightening up the main cable, I need to know if the person on this end needs a minute to bring their post back to plumb. You know, so having 2 or 3 people and maybe even a runner to run tools, that's kind of what would work best.
And to straighten them, were you like using a sledgehammer and a block of wood to shift it if it started coming under?
No, so remember the two posts also have cable winches connecting them to earth anchors. So you use those to keep it plumb. And then as you're tightening the cable, the main cable with the third cable winch, then those 3 start playing together. Right? So you need to sort of be coordinated and talking to each other.
Yeah.
And
The idea of an installation team,
is that something that, was that something GinTec would do or something that you?
So GinTec does install a system, so that you can hire GinTec, as far as I understand, to come and install a system. Again, it's also something I want to reach out to some of the high tunnel builders to just get that idea in their mind as well, because I think this is totally something within their abilities.
And GinTec is in Canada?
Yep.
So if they were sending a crew, they'd send one down, or did they have people
They
here?
have people in the States as well
We don't
that
have a
do it,
lot
mainly
right
in the
now, but-
Midwest, from what I understand. But
Do you know of any teams locally?
I don't. I mean, again, it'd be anybody who's doing a high tunnel construction. To Esther's point, anybody who's doing orchard trellising or vineyard
Not
trellising.
every
Sure.
I mean,
they wouldn't know how to do this specifically, but I bet they could take a good look at it
Yeah,
and figure it out.
It took a while, but
Yeah.
people have started to show up.
And it helped once
That's
we
right.
once we
That's right.
started
Yeah.
Where you had to have a
And will you
reservation.
have resources like this on the website on
Yes.
the UVM?
Yeah, yeah. So
And I
planning to
understand
break
that. I
the
wouldn't go to
project
a
down
market
into
if I had
steps.
to.
Have
Yeah,
videos for
especially
each
driving
step,
through
some
Stephentown. It's like, I don't
some
wanna have to
PDFs and blog
try
posts to
it.
describe
And,
what
it's like,
the key tools are for each step and what some of the challenges were, what we learned. So yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, Troy and then.
Our
the,
setup
online-
is
online orders where
a little bit narrower, although there are 8 rows, and it's what, 100 feet long? 110 feet long, so it's much more manageable.
Yeah.
image.
Yeah,
curbside pickup and that kind of thing.
And we actually have a
In the beginning,
fence system
yeah.
where the corners
Once
are
things got
anchored in
rolling,
concrete,
we
and then the others have sleeves that get driven in, and then we slide the
Yep.
metal pole, and
We just stopped.
they do have eyelets. They aren't J bolts,
Yep.
but they're eyelets. And if one put the anchors in, I have a feeling those poles would actually
Yeah.
hold the weight. So
Probably.
that if you had the anchor to put in, then one could use it. It's a much lighter thing, but it seems like the poles really are just taking the downward pressure.
Yep.
And if you really have it plumb, then it shouldn't be bowing or shifting.
Right.
But still, this, you know, with the anchors and the loop and the way they fit on the diagonal, and everything is
Kind of nice.
pretty, yeah. Well, don't be surprised if you hear more. from
Okay,
us,
no, reach
but
out.
for
Glad to help.
now, we've taken in about as much as we can
Good,
digest.
good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys, we'll be in touch, yes.